Have you ever wondered how to get the most out of your paint inlays on a textured surface? Stick around, I've got some secrets to guide you through the process step by step. So today we're going to be working on this very textured sign. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the Roycycled Urn stencil, and I'm going to be using bits of the Vita Flora paint inlay. So first off, let's get this stencil out of the package. And I always keep these plastic bags. They work really good for when you're layering your decoupage paper. So always save those. So I'm just gonna kind of line that up right, and I'm just eyeballing it. And I'm going to tape my stencil down so that it doesn't move around on me. Should be good. And I'm gonna do a fairly dark brown first, and then I was gonna come over that with kind of a gray and some light colors. I wanna do a bunch. So this is cast iron. It's one of the newest colors, but I'm just gonna add a little bit. This is kind of a mixture of chocolate and casement, and there's a little bit of coal black in here. I'm going to grab some masking tape just to wrap around the bristles, just to hold them a little bit more steady for stenciling. I don't have special stencil brushes. These work perfectly for stenciling. So I kind of like these better than your standard stencil brush, just because the bristles are a little bit finer on the tip. So I kind of like that. So if you're familiar with stenciling at all, less is always more. So you want to go on with a small amount of product so you don't get bleed through under your stencil, especially when working with a textured piece like this. Okay, so there's step one. I'm gonna give this a really quick dry with my gentler heat tool, because I do not want to mess up my stencil. I'm going to use Prairie Gray. This is a DIY paint color, but it is an absolutely beautiful gray brown color. I'm going to use this, but I'm gonna mix it with some salt wash to kind of create more of a raised effect, because when I wanna add some color and stuff after, I need there to be texture to apply that to. I haven't decided yet whether I'm gonna dry brush or whether I'm gonna use a wax, but I'm going to use Prairie Gray with some salt wash. And I'm actually gonna mix it in one of these bowls because they're heavier and I don't have to chase it around. I don't measure, I just kind of start with a little bit and see what kind of texture I end up with, which, as you can see, this is a lot. This is pretty thick. So I'm going to add a little bit more paint. So I'm going lightly because I don't want to push it under. Okay, let's lift this. You ready? Ready to lift it? Ooh, I love it. Look at that. I love this. So there's some great texture on here that I can work with to kind of build up and add color. So I'm going to go rinse off my stencil because I don't want to wreck it. And I will be back once this is dry. So I'm using my heavy duty heat tool to dry this. Because I'm speeding up the drying process, it's actually giving me some really cool cracks. I'm gonna stop that and show you. Let's see if I can zoom you in. There we go. So can you see the cracks forming here as it's drying? That is just adding to the cool factor. Sometimes there's just these little things that happen as you're going that just add to the overall effect. So this cracking that's happening, that's perfect. Doesn't bother me one bit. Okay, so I got that a good head start on the drying. Okay, so you can see because it's a stencil, so the bridges that are on the stencil that kind of hold it together, I'm just going to go in with this paint color, which was my base, and I'm going to just extend those lines and kind of finish it off. Now this just kind of customizes everything. These are just the little things that make each piece unique. 5 different people can use the exact same stencil and they can get 5 different results. And that's kind of the good part about it. So as I was drying here, I was going in with a pretty wet brush and just adding a little bit. More kind of shadow to this side. There's not a lot of paint on the brush. It's pretty much just wet with some leftover paint here. but that alone has changed it up quite a bit. So you're taking color and creating dimension. And you just have to kind of experiment. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. If you're a formally trained artist, you know exactly how to do this stuff. I'm not, so I just keep adding until I like it. Sometimes that means repainting it altogether, but it's pretty warm. So my plan is to coat this whole piece with a coat of clear patina, because that will seal in all of this paint, because I used kind of DIY paint and fusion paint. The fusion paint will be fine because it has a built-in top coat. DIY paint does not, so I don't want it to move around on me and just end up making a muddy looking mess. So let's go ahead and do that. So clear patina. I'll be applying the paint inlay with the clear patina. So that being said, paint inlays were designed to be used with chalk style paint. That is their designated medium. But you can use them with other products. You can use them with acrylic paints. You can use them with clear coats. I use them with clear patina for the most part. And the reason for that is because I have this wonderful texture and color and everything on this board already, and I just want to utilize that. I don't want to paint over it to apply my inlay. So this is why I use the clear patina quite a bit when using paint inlays. Because for one reason or another, I have already created a base that I like. They're designed to be used with chalk style paint. And when they first came out, the IOD sisters did let us know that the ingredients in clear coats or acrylic style paints or acrylic based paints or other such products will just kind of hang on to the carrier sheet of the inlay. So what happens is, if you look through it with, I don't even know what they're called now off the top of my head, but those little like jeweler glass things, you will be able to see tiny little fibers from the carrier sheet. I don't know about you, but I don't plan on looking at any of my crafts with one of those. So I'm not super worried about it. And I have tested them. I've left them overnight to dry into the medium, and I've never had an issue with it. So, okay, so now this has to dry really, really, really well. If you have created this wonderful blended furniture or blended paint background, and you want to apply your inlay on top of that, I always seal it with a coat of clear patina first. Then I can apply my inlay when that's dry to the touch. But the trick to that is you don't want to try to then speed up with a blow dryer or with a heat tool your inlay drying and then come back in and try to peel that off right away. Because what ends up happening, and I learned this the hard way, is that the surface of your paint or the surface of what you're working on has evaporated and feels dry, but inside isn't dry. So you want to when you're peeling off your inlay, your carrier paper, the carrier sheet, then it can actually pull even your base paint up. It probably will, actually. It's not a might. It's pretty much a guarantee, which is a big disaster, because then there's really nothing that you can do about that other than lay it back down and let it dry completely, I say overnight, and hope for the best. So I have destroyed entire inlays learning that the hard way. So okay, so now I want to get this good and dry, and then we will start on the inlay. I'm back. So these are the two birds. So what I have left out of this one is what I didn't use on the secretary desk. So I am wanting to put these two birds kind of right here. First off, I'm going to want to put these pretty little butterflies. Okay, so I'm just kind of eyeballing things as I go. So right now, I'm noticing, so this butterfly is going to be partially hidden by the birds. That's okay. I still want it to kind of peek out. So I've got it lined up with this bottom edge on this stencil. It's really hard for you guys to see that on there. But, so that goes there. I'm going to move these birds aside because they're basically the last layer that's going to go on. There's just a tiny little bit, the top of this leaf, that is over the edge, so that's okay. And then there was these ones that I want to have just draping, like the spillers in your flower pot. So let's bring these birds back and see how they're going to sit. So, and always remember when you're lining up your paint inlays, that when you're kind of mapping it out, planning it out, that the painted part is the bright part. You need that face down, okay? Okay, so now I'm going to put these two first. So I'm going to take just a piece of tape, and I think the best place to anchor is going to be here on the bottom. Now this way, because they're anchored down there, I can take this and flip it up, apply my patina, and then lay it back down, and I'm good to go. Okay, so I have my wet cloth. Now this is just a microfiber cloth. You can use anything. You can use a baby wipe in a pinch. And it's wrung out so that it's not dripping. So not like super wrung out, but wrung out. Okay. So my clear patina, and I'm going to use my same brush from earlier. Just going to stick this piece of tape here so I know how far to go up. Okay, so the trick to this is you're going to want it pretty heavy. So this is another reason why I use clear patina for this, because it is thicker than your regular clear coat. And I know it looks like I'm using a lot here, but it does dry crystal clear. But if you don't use enough, especially on a textured surface like this, you will not get a good transfer of your paint inlay. So you want to make sure you're putting it down heavy. Okay. So I'm actually going to mist this a bit. I forgot to mist that first. And now I'm going to lay it back in. kind of like decoupage paper where it kind of stretches when you wet it. And this is going to help really get it worked down into all of those little nooks and crannies. So I'm using a piece of food wrap because it allows me to smush that down in there without tearing my paper. So this thought just occurred to me. This is just a dry brush. And I'm using it to really push the inlay in. It's almost not stiff enough. Oh, here's an old stencil brush. That might work better. And I really want to push it into all of those little nooks and crannies in this board. You're never going to get a perfectly precise, crystal clear, wonderful image when you're working on a textured piece. I don't know why my nose is so itchy today, guys. I'm sorry. But there's little tricks like this that you can do to try to get as much contact with all those little grooves as possible. So another thing is, see how I've got this excess here? I'm just going to go along with a baby wipe and I'm just going to blot some of that away. So there's one side. Now let's apply the clear patina to this side. Same thing, you want a really good heavy coat. That's probably the most important thing that I've learned when using paint inlays, is to not be scared about using enough medium. Because what ends up happening is your inlay has nothing to set into. If you don't use enough medium, it just kind of, you get a really feeble kind of impression. You can watch my secretary desk video, and I kind of show you a prime example of that. Okay, so I'm going to mist this first, and then I'm going to lay it down into that wet. And same thing, I'm just going over, and I'm actually pressing, I'm giving it a good amount of pressure with the brush, and I'm working it in as much as I can. So especially here, because I've added even more texture with this raised stencil. So I really want to make sure I'm getting that all in there. Okay, so I've got that down quite a bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to mist these inlays again, and I'm just going to really smush that in there. And like I said earlier, it's kind of like decoupage paper. When you mist the paper when you're applying it, it kind of stretches it out and you don't get wrinkles. If you look at, I guess I don't need that there anymore. If you look at this, usually you get wrinkles in your inlay paper. I don't have any wrinkles in my paper. Like there's a couple down here, but I'm not concerned about that part. The wrinkles in the inlays are also another thing I see a lot of people asking about, that they want to try to alleviate that problem. Because what happens with the wrinkles is it just shows up in the texture of your finished piece. And some people are perfectly fine with it. I'm okay with wrinkles. But some people really want more of a perfect application, of a perfect finish, or as close to that they can get. And that's fine. It's just trying to come up with ways to get as close as you possibly can to the finished product that you want. And I love inlays. I really love using these inlays. They just give a completely different, they're just so different from anything else. Okay, same thing. I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dab off some of this extra patina that I've got hanging out on the outside here. I could take this tape off. Really make sure that's pressed down in there. So I'm just pushing. I'm not rubbing, I'm just pushing. Now this one, I can't do this. I can't apply this one until these carrier sheets have been removed, and I can't remove those until this is dry. Okay, I actually think I'm gonna have to give this more drying time than just speeding it up with a heat tool, just because of the amount of medium that I had to use over this raised stencil. I don't want to try and take it off early and mess it up. So I'm just going to let this dry, and I'll either be back at this later today. I should be able to get at this later today, but I'm gonna have to let it sit for a while and do its thing, and then I'll be back. Okay, so these are dry, and we are going to take these carrier sheets off. So I'm going to want to zoom you guys in. So now first thing is I'm going to give it a mist of water. This is what is going to release the carrier sheet from the inlay and leave that inlay behind. So I gave it a pretty good mist, and now I'm taking my wet cloth. And remember, this is not dripping wet, but not wrung out dry either. Okay, now we're just going to start peeling this back. Ooh, look how beautiful. So I'm getting, so that's what I was worried about. Okay, so I just put that back down, and I'm gonna let this is gonna have to dry overnight. So remember what I was saying about over this raised stencil part, that thicker area might not work for removing this carrier sheet early. So I'm just gonna have to let it do its thing. So we will come back tomorrow, and this will be really good and dry overnight, and then we can remove this carrier sheet and everything will be good. I don't want to pull up any of the stencil that I've laid down or any of that. I don't want to pull up any of the initial work that I did. So, and plus then it messes up your inlay. You don't get a good application of your inlay. So we'll be back tomorrow. Sometimes you have to be patient. I'm back. So it is day 2, and this has been able to dry overnight. So it's good and dry. So we should have no issues taking this off. Okay, so first we are going to give this a good mist. This is what releases our carrier sheet from the paint inlay. So I've given that a kind of a good soaking. Just gonna let that sit for a few seconds before we try and peel that off. Okay, so I'm just going to push this down with my wet cloth. Okay. This is working pretty good. I've got a little piece here that's not, the paper's not wanting to come up. It's too stuck. There we go. So that got some really good coverage. I'm actually going to zoom you in for the second side here. Okay. So if you remember, I really smushed this in to all of those little, all that little texture, all those little grooves. On this piece, and it worked really, really well. I'm happy with how that turned out. And look how that worked out really, really good. Like you can see in this deep groove, obviously my inlay didn't make it in there, but even through all of this heavily textured stuff, it still showed up really, really well. I'm very happy with how that turned out. Okay, so now you remember that I wanted to add even more here. So if I remember how this was set, remember I wanted to line up this bottom edge with that edge, and then just kind of eyeballing that that's straight. Okay, we're back. This is all dry and we're going to give it a mist. Same process for removal. This is coming out really, really good. So I don't know if it is the extra care I'm taking as far as trying to work it down into all of the texture on this wood, or if it's my paintbrush method. But it's really working out well. It's turning out so pretty. So now my other option is I want to put these birds. I'm gonna have to seal this up first, but I wanna kind of plan where I'm putting these birds, because they're going to overlap quite a bit. I want their little feet to be on the edge of the top of the urn. And then I'm planning on putting, I really like this one, and I haven't used it anywhere yet, but it's just a little too big for here. So I'm thinking of putting this down at the very bottom. Just right on the wood. I'll have a little bit of overlap. It'll just tie in some color here. Yeah, I like that. So first things first, I'm going to dry this, and then we're going to seal all of this inlay, because I don't want that to get all messed up. So you have to do this kind of stuff in stages sometimes. Okay. And I'm just going to use my clear patina to seal it. I've got it still in this bowl. I'm just going to add a little bit of water because I don't need it to be full strength. So a good 3 squirts of water here. Stir it really well. Okay, now you want to work pretty quick. You don't want to smear your inlay, so you're just brushing it on. If you overbrush, you will smear the inlay, and that would be awful at this stage, because it is a chalk style paint that will reactivate with moisture. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to give that another dry. Okay, I'm just going to let that kind of do its thing, and I'm going to add this one down here. So some clear patina again. Okay, I'll let that dry and we will work on these guys. Now this has to dry completely before I play with this. So my heater is on. I'm gonna go put it under the heater and hopefully that'll speed up the process a little bit. Okay, so I think we're dry. We're ready to take this off. So let's give this a go. First we'll do this bottom one. Perfect. That looks so good. So pretty. Okay, so this has to dry and then we have to seal the whole part. And it came out really well. Like there's some parts you can see where the inlay didn't get right down into those little bit more, I guess, aggressive crevices and stuff in this board. But I still got a really good impression on here. And I'm super happy with that. Okay, so now the easiest, like I could brush over this, but I really don't want to risk smearing this blue. These blues are tough colors that you definitely don't want to smear those. So I'm just going to use, this is a matte clear Rust-Oleum, and it works perfect for sealing these inlays in. So I'm going to use it. It's a little bit stinky, but not too bad. I just put that brown paper underneath so I don't get overspray on my table. Make sure I didn't miss any spots. Okay, so now we're going to let that dry completely, and I want to come back in with, I'm not sure if I'm just going to use like a white wax or white dry brush on this urn in a few spots, just to give it a little bit more depth. I'm going to use parchment as the light colored one, and kind of a mix of cast iron, and warm it up a little bit with this brown. I'm not going to have to do a lot of the shading on here because I've already got a little bit. I'm more interested in the white. So let's start with that. Why not? So just need a little wee bit to start with. And I'm dry brushing. So I want a brush that's going to be flat. And pretty much take all the paint off. And then some more. And I'm just kind of brushing over where there would be some highlight. I know it's super hard to see this. It's really hard to see on camera, but you can see a little bit of that highlight. So it just kind of keeps it so that it appears that the light is kind of coming from this way. And now, I think that's going to work. I don't need to do any of the dark, but I do want to add some gold. DIY Paints Golden Rule. This is the gilding wax. And I'm just going to go with my fingertip and just kind of rub over the high points on the urn. And it's just kind of giving it a little bit of bling. I'm using barely any. You can always add more, but sometimes stuff like this is a little hard to remove. So these are all just the little things that when you look at a piece, you might not notice at first. But the more you look at it, the more you kind of see all those little details. For me anyways, you always kind of step back and really check it out. So you can see that that urn is just kind of a little bit in the background. Okay, but I'm not done yet. I have another idea where I want to just give it a little bit more oomph. Okay, so now this is the dark wax. So there's dark wax and there's black wax. I'm going to go with the dark first. And I'm just going to take this tiny little brush and kind of rub it in. Right on the very edges here. Just to kind of see how it's already giving that little bit of depth. Kind of like a shadow. And now on this side, I'm going to go with a little bit of white. Okay. What do you guys think? I hope this helped give you a few tips and tricks on working with inlays on a textured surface. Because as you can see, there's a lot of texture on these boards. And then I added with the raised stencil here. So I think it turned out really, really good, and it's kind of cool. It's a nice pop of color. So I hope you got some tips and tricks on these inlays to help you work with these inlays on a textured surface, or just giving you the courage to give an inlay a go, because the inlays are a lot of fun. And there are some repeating pattern ones like the Rose Toil, Indigo, I think that's what that one's called. Pretty much any of them that you can just take out little bits, and you can practice with those on various substrates, like various bases or finishes or anything like that, and working with different materials. So you can use them with paint, which is what they're designed to be used with, or you can go with clear patina like I used. I really recommend the clear patina if you're going to go with a clear. I've used it multiple times and I have really good success with it. So there's just some rules with the inlays that you have to get used to. But anyways, thanks so much for joining me on this project, and I hope it inspired you to get out there and give it a go yourself. Thanks again. Have a great day.